So this is Baruch. I'm here at the Tikkun Elevator Kollel, and you see on the right side of the page we have the Tetragrammaton written here, Yud K, Vav K. We've gone through some ideas, and what we're talking about here now is the concept of Yehudim, that is united, and that we understand that the basic principle is that God is only one. He's created, the Almighty has created a world of separations, the Olam Aparah. So the concept here is the concept of bringing it all back together again. And that comes through this name. Now, how does this work? So he says, for the most part, this is Rabbi, of course, we're learning Rabbi Mimran. For the most part, the meditational method of Yehudim involves imagining various names of God and then manipulating the letters. In general, the method of Yehudim is highly advanced and really requires some knowledge of Kabbalah. A good introduction to the method of Yehudim involves visualizing the Tetragrammaton, which we have right here, but he writes it in English as Yud, He, Vav, and so it will be YHVH. That's, I guess, what I'm going to say it. One has to be careful not to try to pronounce this name. Nothing good will come from the pronunciation of this name or the attempt to do that. This is similar to the technique of contemplating the Tetragrammaton described in the previous chapter, but here it is done without any external aid. Significantly, an exercise that entails visualization or visualizing the Tetragrammaton is mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch, the standard code of Jewish law. It is also an introduction to a number of other more advanced techniques discussed in the Kabbalah. Now he says like this: by visualizing God's name, and let's get it back over here, it slipped away from me a little bit. By visualizing God's name, one can attain a tremendous feeling of closeness to God. One actually feels the presence of God and experiences a deep sense of awe in the presence. A number of classic Judaic sources, let's just switch this over here. He says, find such visualization of the verse I have placed this name, which is the name Yud K Vav K, which he writes as YHVH, before me at all times. This type of visualization is also useful during worship and prayer, so that as you're praying and you come across this name, then you actually can sear it into your mind. It's the name of Rahmanas and kindness. Here too, you can use contemplation as an introduction to visualization. In other words, you look at the name, here it is over here. If you find it difficult to visualize the Tetragrammaton, spend a number of days contemplating the name written on a sheet of paper. Just look at this name as it is, like this. You can spend the first half of a session contemplating the written name and the other half visualizing with your eyes closed. Eventually, you'll be able to visualize it without using the card at all. You will not need the physical representation. Now, he says, once you become adept at visualizing the name, you can use it for simple Yichud discussed for the simple Yichud discussed in the last chapter. As discussed there, the Vav in the final He of the name, that's this letter right here and this letter right there, he says, are the masculine and feminine forces of providence. So of reality, the reality that we understand is this represents masculine, that represents feminine. When the Vav and He, these two letters, these last letters, are separated, there is no connection between God and the world below, other than his creative energy. In other words, the energy keeps flowing, but the actual connection is not made. Therefore, like a man and woman in love, the Vav and He yearn and long to be united. This is part of the intention that you have to have when you're looking at this. You want to unite them. It brings God's power to the lower world. When the Vav and He are united, God's presence becomes palpable, and one can have a very strong experience of the divine. So he says like this: one accomplishes this yichud by visualizing the divine name, which he's calling here YHVH, but it could also, but it's really written Yud K Vav K. One focuses on the Vav, and the He, making oneself aware of the longing and yearning of these two letters to unite. When the longing becomes between the two letters becomes unbearable, they finally unite. And this is the nature of actually relationship for psychologists to understand between man and woman. The desire to come together can be very, very full of a lot of tension, and therefore faith is required in order to be able to bridge that tension and to actually make the unity. And a spiritual flood is released when this happens. One feels this as a torrent of divine energy flowing through the body and mind. One is bathed in the spiritual experience and overwhelmed by it. It becomes totally opened up like a vessel for the divine. Once proficiency in visualization is achieved, and that's so he's saying that this is the first thing we need to do. We need to be able to visualize this name in our minds. There are more advanced methods that one can learn. He says one such method mentioned in the Kabbalistic sources is to imagine the sky opening up and to pick oneself ascending into the spiritual realm. Let's bring our Yud-K Vav-K back in again. So he says, let's see how am I going to get it over here. Here we go. So he says, one rises through the seven firmaments, one by one, until one reaches the highest heaven. On this level, one depicts, so you're working with your imagination in your mind, in one's mind, a huge white curtain, infinite in size, filling the entire mind. So now you have this tremendous sheet of whiteness. Written on this white curtain, one visualized the tetragrammaton, this name, Yud-K, Vav-K. So he says, the black of the letters and the white of the curtain become intensified. So you begin to see the differences between the white and the black. Concentrate on this name. Until the letters appear to be black fire on white fire, and you have to keep looking at it until that appears. Now, this is not done at one time. This is a process. Gradually, the letters of the tetragrammaton expand until they appear to be huge mountains of black fire. When the four letters fill the mind completely, one is, as it were, swallowed up in God's name. On a still more advanced level, the letters appear to be not merely written on the curtain, but solid objects with both dimension and texture with some thickness to them, or depth to them. One can see oneself actually entering into the letters, surrounded by their essence on all sides, just moving right into the letters and following their curves and their lines. Finally, one can reach the level where one sees the letter as living entities. As each letter were an angelic being, one becomes uniquely aware of the life force and spiritual energy in each letter, of the significance of the letters, and the flow of energy between one letter and the next. One becomes aware of the unification of the giver with the receiver. That is the concept of this Vav, which is the giver to the He, which is also the concept of the Yud to this K, and this K to this Vav, and this Vav to this K, is that they're all cascading and united together, both frontwards, forwards, and backwards. So he says the receiver and of the ultimate male and female elements of creation, to understand that creation always has to do with male and female. These last methods can bring a person to very high spiritual levels and should not be taken lightly. The original sources state that before attempting any of these more advanced methods, one should spend the entire day in preparation reciting the Psalms and studying the Torah. Before beginning the meditation, one should immerse oneself in a mikveh, a ritual bath, or any other natural body of water to cleanse oneself both physically and spiritually. Some sources also indicate that one should dress totally in white for these advanced meditations. Visualizing nothingness is also a technique used in the most advanced meditational exercises. If one visualizes nothing, nothingness, and at the same time clear the mind of thought. The mind becomes a total blank. The mind is then at its most sensitive, open to even the most ethereal experiences. This is therefore an important technique for experiencing the spiritual. This is Baruch Fleischman, and this has been Rabbi Yosef Chaim Mimran. Here's your name right again. We are at the Tikkun elevator call-out.